I'd been behind the wheel for what seemed like ages, the road unfurling before me, desolate and quiet. Only the engine's hum and the breeze whispering through the open window broke the silence. I wasn't rushing, but I wasn't dawdling either. Maybe I was just caught up in my thoughts, trying to shake off the day's stresses, the daily grind of work and life. The idea of a weekend ahead, maybe with friends, maybe alone, felt distant and unimportant. Then I saw the flashing lights. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I checked my rearview mirror, but there they were again, the steady, unyielding glow of red and blue. A police car was pulling me over. I muttered under my breath, tapping my fingers on the steering wheel, already annoyed. I didn't think I'd been speeding, but I knew how easily the police could find a reason to pull you over, always seeming to catch you at the wrong moment. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart beating a little faster, my palms starting to sweat. I wasn't anxious, but being stopped by the police always made you doubt yourself, even if you knew you hadn't done anything wrong. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, collecting myself. I checked the rearview mirror again and saw her, tall, confident, with a posture that screamed authority. Her uniform was neat, her face calm, but there was something about her expression that made me feel like I'd done something far worse than speeding. I rolled down the window and tried to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was still racing. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't smile, but her eyes locked onto mine for a second longer than I expected. Her gaze was sharp, assessing. I could tell she wasn't in a hurry. She took a moment before responding, almost like she was trying to read me. "Do you know why I stopped you?" she asked, her voice firm but not unkind. I shook my head. "Honestly, no, officer. I thought I was driving fine." She nodded slowly, looking down at her notepad before writing something down. "You were going 15 miles over the limit. It's dangerous to speed on these roads." I sighed and nodded, my mind racing. 15 miles over. I hadn't even realized I was going that fast. I muttered a quick apology, trying to sound more composed than I felt. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I wasn't paying attention," I said, even though the excuse sounded weak to my own ears. She didn't say anything for a moment, just wrote down more notes on her pad. I could feel the tension hanging in the air. I glanced at her again. She looked professional, but there was something else about her, something that made me feel uneasy. I couldn't place it at first, but I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. "Stay right here," she finally said, stepping back to her patrol car. I watched her walk away, her boots clicking on the pavement. For a moment, I felt foolish. What was it about her? Why did I feel this strange, almost magnetic pull toward her? It wasn't like I had never interacted with a police officer before, but there was something different about her, the way she moved, the way she carried herself. It was all so confident. A few minutes later, she came back to my car, holding the ticket in one hand. She handed it to me, her eyes meeting mine again. The air between us felt thick, almost electric. She seemed unfazed by the interaction, like it was just another stop in her day. I took the ticket from her, thinking about how much it was going to cost me. As I glanced at the fine printed on the front, something caught my eye on the back of the ticket. In a scrawl that looked almost hastily written, there was a number, a phone number. My eyes flicked back up to her, wondering if I had imagined it. Was this some kind of mistake? Did she mean to write it down there, or was it for me? She didn't seem to notice that I had turned the ticket over to look at it. She was already walking back to her patrol car, and I was left there, holding the ticket in my hand, staring at the number. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Why would she leave me her number? Was this a joke? Did she do this with everyone? It didn't make sense. And yet here I was, still holding the ticket, unsure of what to do next. I looked back up, expecting to see her still watching, but she was already back in her car, pulling away with a quick wave. My heart skipped a beat as she drove off, and I was left alone on the side of the road, the ticket with her number burning a hole in my hand. I shook my head, trying to shake off the oddness of the situation. I started the car and drove off, trying to focus on the road ahead, but that number kept flashing in my mind. I couldn't get rid of it. Was this real? Was she serious? Should I call? The rest of the drive home felt like a blur. I could hardly focus on the road. My mind was still on the ticket, on the number, on her. I tried to tell myself it wasn't a big deal, that I should forget about it, but somehow I knew I wasn't going to. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I got home, parked the car, and sat there for a while, staring at the ticket in my hand. The number on the back seemed to burn into my thoughts. Should I call? Was it a mistake? I glanced at my phone and almost typed the number in, but then hesitated. I sat back in my seat, trying to make sense of it all. Was I overthinking this, or was this some kind of sign? Eventually, I put the ticket down, stood up, and walked into the house. I had no idea what to do next, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to forget about this, not yet, not until I figured it out. I spent the next few hours just trying to put it out of my mind. After a long day, I wanted nothing more than to relax and forget about everything. I tossed the ticket on the kitchen counter and tried to distract myself with something else, anything else. But every time I walked by it, every time I caught sight of the number scrolled on the back of that ticket, I couldn't shake the thought of her. Her voice still echoed in my head. Her confident, calm tone when she spoke to me. I could feel the weight of her gaze when she handed me the ticket, and it lingered long after she left. Why had she left me her number? Was it some kind of joke, or was she actually interested in me? The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I knew I should just let it go. After all, she was a police officer. What kind of relationship could come from something like that? It wasn't like I had any real reason to believe this was anything more than a random act on her part. But still, the thought of calling her lingered. I tried to focus on my work, putting off the inevitable. But when the evening wore on and I found myself alone, I realized I was still thinking about it. Around 9 p.m., I grabbed my phone. I stared at it for a few moments, my finger hovering over the keypad. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room and forget this ever happened. But another part of me, the part I couldn't ignore, was already dialing the number. My heart raced as I waited for the call to connect. My fingers trembled slightly, and I could hear the sound of my own breath in my ears. It was a strange feeling, calling someone I didn't know, someone who was a complete stranger to me, a police officer, no less. The phone rang twice before the line picked up. Hello? Her voice was warm, smooth, but there was something about it that made my stomach tighten. I wasn't sure what I expected, but this wasn't it. There was no formality, no professionalism, just her voice, the woman I had been thinking about for hours. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. This was it. I had done it. I had actually called her. Hi, I finally stammered. Is this Officer Miller? There was a slight pause on the other end of the line before she responded. It is. Who is this? I felt a rush of nerves wash over me. I had no idea what I was supposed to say. I had never done anything like this before. I mean, I had spoken to plenty of people in my life, but never like this, never over a phone call like this. It's me, the guy you pulled over earlier today, I said, my voice suddenly sounding much smaller than it had before. The speeding ticket. There was a slight chuckle on the other end of the line, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Oh, I remember you. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know if that was a good or bad thing, but hearing her say that made me feel a little more at ease. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Yeah, I didn't know if you meant to leave your number on the back of the ticket. I continued, fumbling with my words. I thought it was kind of unexpected. There was another pause. It felt like an eternity, the silence stretching on between us. And then she spoke, her voice more relaxed now, with a hint of amusement in it. I thought you wouldn't call me, she said softly, almost teasingly. I felt my face flush. I wasn't sure if it was the surprise of her response or the way she said it, but I suddenly felt like I was in way over my head. I had been trying to play it cool, trying to act like this wasn't a big deal, but now I was on the receiving end of that very thing I had been nervous about. Her tone was playful, but it also felt genuine. I wasn't sure if I should, I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck nervously. But here I am. She laughed softly, and the sound made something in my chest tighten. It was a good laugh, the kind that made you feel at ease, but also a little intrigued. I'm glad you called. I wasn't sure if you would. There was a long pause after that, and I wasn't sure where to go from here. I had called, but what now? How? I mean, why had she even given me her number? Was this just a friendly gesture, or was there more to it? I began, trying to regain some semblance of composure. What happens now? She seemed to consider the question for a moment before answering. Well, now we talk and see where it goes. My mind raced. See where it goes? What did that even mean? Was she really interested in me, or was this just her way of being friendly? I wasn't sure, but the idea of talking to her more, of actually getting to know her, sent a thrill through me. We spent the next hour on the phone, talking about anything and everything. It started off awkwardly at first, but as we continued, the conversation became easier. We talked about our days, about our jobs, about little things that made us laugh. It felt so natural, like we had known each other for a long time, even though we were strangers just hours ago. Before I knew it, I was looking at the clock and realizing how late it had gotten. The conversation had flown by, and I couldn't believe how much I had enjoyed it. I should probably let you go, she said, her voice now sounding a little quieter. But I'm glad you called. It's been nice. I'm glad you gave me your number, I said, before I could stop myself. The words were out before I could think about them, and I felt my heart skip a beat when I realized what I had just said. But then she responded with a laugh, and it felt like everything was fine again. Well, it's not every day I give out my number to a guy I pull over, but you seem interesting. Interesting, I repeated, smiling. That's one way to put it. Yeah, she said, a hint of playfulness in her voice. We'll see if I change my mind. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone, my heart still racing. It felt like something was just beginning between us, but I had no idea where it would go next. And that was the exciting part. The next couple of days felt like a blur after that first phone call. I couldn't stop thinking about Officer Miller. Every time I closed my eyes, her voice echoed in my head. It was a strange feeling, and I tried to focus on my routine, but it was impossible not to be pulled back to that conversation. She had said, "We'll see where it goes," and as much as I tried to ignore it, I wanted to know where this was leading. I tried to go about my usual routine, getting up for work and tackling the tasks that came my way. But her number stayed in my mind like a small, nagging voice that wouldn't let me rest. It was clear that this wasn't just a one-time thing. I was curious. No, more than curious. I was intrigued. On the fourth day after our call, I got a text from her. The message was simple. Hey, how's your day going? My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure why, but the idea that she was reaching out first made me feel like I was in uncharted territory. I replied almost immediately, hoping I didn't seem too eager. Good, just getting through work. How about you? The response came quickly, and soon we were back in our easy rhythm. It wasn't long before we were exchanging messages throughout the day. Small updates, random thoughts, the type of conversation that felt effortless. The kind that happens between people who are already comfortable with one another, even if we hadn't actually met in person yet. Then, a few hours later, she sent a message that made my stomach flip. I'm off work tonight. What do you say we meet up? I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. My first instinct was to say yes without hesitation, but I found myself hesitating. This was real now. This wasn't just some phone call or a fleeting moment. It was the first step toward something that could actually turn into something more. And as thrilling as that thought was, it was also a little terrifying. I took a deep breath and typed back, I'd like that. Where do you want to meet? A few moments passed before she replied, and when the message came through, I couldn't help but smile. There's a small cafe downtown. I'll be there at 7. See you then. I stared at the message, a rush of anticipation building in my chest. I didn't know what I was expecting, but the thought of seeing her in person, of actually meeting her after all the messages, was enough to make my heart race. I spent the next few hours getting ready, making sure I looked presentable, maybe even a little more polished than I normally would have. I was nervous, not just because this was a date, but because this wasn't just any date. This was with a police officer, the one who had pulled me over, the one who had left her number on the back of a speeding ticket. I still wasn't sure what I had gotten myself into, but I was about to find out. When I walked into the cafe, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I didn't know what to expect, but the thought of seeing her in person, of actually meeting her after all the messages, was enough to make my heart race. I spotted her sitting at a table in the corner, looking just as confident and composed as she had when she pulled me over. I took a deep breath and walked over to her. "Hi," I said, trying to sound more composed than I felt. She looked up and smiled, her eyes meeting mine. "Hi," she replied, her voice warm and inviting. I sat down across from her, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. This was real now. This wasn't just some phone call or a fleeting moment. It was the first step towards something that could actually turn into something more. We spent the next few hours talking and getting to know each other. The conversation flowed easily, and I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't expected. She was easy to talk to, and I could feel a connection between us that was hard to ignore. As the night wore on, I realized that I didn't want it to end. I wanted to keep talking to her, to keep getting to know her. When it was finally time to say goodbye, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that I wanted to see her again. I wanted to keep getting to know her, to keep exploring this connection between us. As I walked out of the cafe and into the night, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it would go next. My eyes quickly swept the room, and it wasn't challenging to spot her. She was seated by the window, dressed in a casual leather jacket and jeans. Even in such simple attire, she stood out. There was something about her that made her impossible to overlook. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach her or just admire her from a distance. Then she glanced up, and our eyes met. The smile she gave me was warm and genuine, instantly melting away any nerves I had. I walked over to her table, my heart pounding in my chest. "You look amazing," I said, feeling a bit awkward as I pulled out the chair and sat down. She laughed softly, the sound instantly putting me at ease. "Thanks. You look pretty good yourself." There was a brief, comfortable silence before I spoke again. "So, this is a little surreal, right?" She raised an eyebrow. "Surreal?" I thought this was the part where we stop being awkward and start having fun. I smiled, feeling the tension ease up. "Right. Let's do that." We spent the next few hours in deep conversation. The small talk we had grown accustomed to through texts and phone calls was replaced by genuine, face-to-face interaction. She shared stories about her job, the crazy experiences she'd had on the force, and her life outside of work. I opened up about my own life, sharing my ambitions, small victories, and failures. It felt like we had already built a connection, even though we were meeting in person for the first time. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and with every word, I found myself becoming more comfortable around her. There was something so easy about her presence, something that made me feel like I could tell her anything without fear of judgment. At one point, she leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "So, how has this been for you? This whole phone number on the back of a ticket thing." I let out a soft laugh, running a hand through my hair. "Honestly, I'm still processing it. It's not something you expect, you know." She smiled, the corners of her lips curving just slightly. "I can imagine, but I'm glad you called." I felt a warmth spread through me. She was glad I called, and the more we talked, the more I realized how much I enjoyed her company. She was confident, funny, and incredibly easy to talk to. But there was also something deeper there, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just a surface level attraction, it was something more. The evening passed by in a blur, and before I knew it, it was nearly 10 p.m. I glanced at my phone and realized how late it had gotten. "Well, I should probably get going," I said reluctantly. "I have work tomorrow." She nodded, though there was a slight hesitation in her eyes. "Me too." We stood up together, and she pulled her jacket on. I walked with her to the door, my thoughts racing. This had been everything I had hoped for, and more. She was even more amazing in person than I had imagined. "So I'll see you again?" I asked, my voice a little uncertain. She gave me a playful look. "You think you can handle it?" I chuckled, feeling more at ease than I had all evening. "I'm sure I can." She smiled and handed me a small piece of paper. "Well, just in case you forget, call me sometime." I took the paper, my heart racing. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. The next few days were a whirlwind after that unforgettable evening at the cafe. I couldn't stop thinking about Officer Miller. Her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, the way she listened to me like I was the only person in the room. Everything about her stuck with me. We had exchanged numbers at the end of the night, and the next morning I found myself staring at my phone, wondering when I should text her again. It felt a little ridiculous, but I didn't want to seem too eager. So I waited. I gave it a few hours before I finally sent a message, keeping it casual. "Hey, I had a great time last night. Hope you're having a good day." I hit send before I could second guess myself. My nerves had returned, but I forced myself to focus on something else. After all, I couldn't let myself be consumed by one message, right? A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Her reply was almost instant. "I had a great time too. It was really nice to finally meet you. Let's do it again soon." A small smile spread across my face. She had reached out first this time. There was something about that, something reassuring. It made me feel like I wasn't the only one invested in whatever this was turning into. I replied quickly, feeling more confident. "Definitely. How about dinner this weekend?" she replied almost immediately. Sounds perfect. And just like that, we had plans. The following weekend came faster than I expected, and I found myself standing in front of the same cafe, waiting for her. I was early, trying not to seem too eager, but the nerves were still there. As the minutes ticked by, I found myself pacing, glancing at my phone every few seconds. What if this was all a mistake? What if I was reading too much into everything? I couldn't help but think back to that night, how we connected so effortlessly. But this time, it was different. This was a date, and it felt like it could lead to something serious. Finally, she arrived, walking in with that same confident stride. My heart skipped a beat. She looked incredible, as always, dressed casually, but with a touch of elegance. She had this effortless charm that seemed to draw people in without even trying. When she saw me, she smiled, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. She seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Hey," I greeted her, standing up. "You look amazing." "Thanks," she said, returning the compliment. "You don't look so bad yourself." We both laughed, the awkward tension that I'd been feeling slowly fading away as we sat down together. The conversation started easily, just like last time. We talked about everything and nothing, sharing more about our lives, our past experiences, our hopes for the future. It wasn't just small talk. It was real, deep conversations that made me feel like we were getting to know each other in a way that was rare. As the night went on, I realized how comfortable I felt around her. It was almost like we had known each other for years, not just a few days. And with every word she said, I found myself more drawn to her. It wasn't just her looks or her confidence. It was the way she made me feel seen, heard, and understood. At one point, she leaned back in her chair, studying me with a playful smile. "So, what's the real reason you agreed to give me your number?" I laughed, feeling a little caught off guard. "I don't know. Maybe I just thought you were interesting." She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Interesting? Is that the best you've got?" I shrugged, feeling a little sheepish. "I guess you could say it was more than that. It was just the way you carried yourself. I don't know. There's something about you." She smiled softly, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to fade away. "I'm glad you called me," she said, her voice lower now, almost intimate. "I've been thinking about you too." That simple admission made my chest tighten. It was the first time she had openly said anything like that, and hearing it felt significant. I wasn't sure where this was headed, but I knew I wanted to find out. The night continued, and the more we talked, the more I realized how much I was enjoying her company. It wasn't just the conversation or the connection we were building. It was the way she made me feel like I could be myself. There was no pressure, no pretenses. She accepted me for who I was, flaws and all, and it made everything feel easier. When the evening came to a close, we stood up to leave. It felt like time had flown by. I wasn't ready for it to end. "I had a really great time," I said, walking with her to the door. "Me too," she replied, smiling warmly. "I'm glad we did this." I couldn't help but smile back. Same here. She paused at the door and looked up at me, her expression softer now. So, what happens next? I wasn't sure what to say at first. This was uncharted territory for me. I had never really been in a situation like this, where things felt so natural and yet so unfamiliar. But as I looked at her, I realized I didn't need to have all the answers. I think we just see where this goes, I said, unsure but confident in my words. She nodded slowly, her smile growing. I like that idea. We walked out into the cool evening air together, side by side. It felt like the beginning of something new, something exciting. And as I walked her to her car, I couldn't help but feel like this might be the start of something special. It had been a few weeks since that unforgettable dinner, and the days with Officer Miller, Avery, had been nothing short of a whirlwind. Each moment spent together seemed to add another layer to what was quickly becoming something undeniable between us. We had seen each other more times than I could count by now, and with every encounter, it felt like we were building something real, something meaningful. I had never imagined a relationship like this would develop out of a simple ticket for speeding, but life had a funny way of surprising you. Avery wasn't like anyone I had ever met before. She was strong, confident, with a fire in her eyes that made me want to keep getting closer. But what made it even more special was how she made me feel, how she listened, how she understood, how she genuinely cared. I could tell she was cautious, perhaps even skeptical about getting too close. But something told me she was ready to take a leap, and I was more than ready to join her. It was late one evening, just a few days after a casual but meaningful text exchange where we had talked about everything from work to our favorite movies. There was something in the air that night. It felt different, like the night was calling for something bigger, something more. I stared at my phone for a moment, hesitating. As much as we talked, I still wasn't completely sure where we stood. But that was part of the excitement, wasn't it? The unknown, the thrill of discovering something new. I dialed her number and waited for her to pick up. The soft ringtone echoed through my apartment, and I felt a surge of anticipation rush through me. "Hey, it's me," I said when she answered, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was beating faster than usual. "Hey, you," she responded, her voice warm. "What's up?" I couldn't help but smile at how easy it was to talk to her, even after everything that had happened between us. The moments we'd shared, the things we'd said to each other. It had only deepened my feelings for her. I took a breath, wanting to get straight to the point. "I was thinking about you," I said, my words coming out more vulnerable than I intended. "And I realized that I want to see you again. I mean, I want this. I want us." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, and I held my breath. Had I said the wrong thing? Was I moving too fast? But then I heard her voice again, softer than before. "I was hoping you'd say that," she said, and my heart swelled with relief. "I've been thinking about this too, about us." A weight lifted off my chest as the tension between us finally melted away. It was like we were both on the same page now. Neither of us had to pretend anymore. "I don't want to wait anymore," she continued. "Let's make this real, okay?" I smiled, my hands trembling slightly with excitement. Let's. The next few weeks flew by, and before I knew it, things between us were more solid than ever. We were no longer just a couple of people who had met under unusual circumstances. We were two people who genuinely cared about each other, and it felt good, really good. Avery became my safe space, my place of peace, even with the chaos of the world outside. We spent more and more time together, whether it was grabbing coffee in the morning or going on long walks around the city after work. We would spend hours talking about everything and nothing, sometimes laughing until our sides hurt. It wasn't just the fun moments that bonded us, though. It was the quiet ones, too. The moments when we would just be sitting in silence. But it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. One afternoon, as we sat in the park watching the sunset, she turned to me with a thoughtful look on her face. "You know," she started, "I don't usually do this. I don't usually let people in so easily." She paused, as if trying to find the right words. "But with you, it's different. I can't explain it. You've been a breath of fresh air." I looked at her, a warmth spreading through me. I understood exactly what she meant. This was different. Everything about it felt different in the best way possible. "I feel the same way," I replied honestly. "I don't know what it is, but I feel like I've known you forever." Avery smiled, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the park, and it felt like time had slowed down just for us. "Maybe we've been waiting for each other all along," she said softly. I didn't need to say anything more. The truth was in her words and in the way I felt when she was around. The more I got to know her, the more I realized I couldn't picture my life without her in it. There was no need for grand gestures or elaborate speeches. All I had to do was be with her. That evening, we went to dinner at a small Italian restaurant, our favorite spot. It was quiet, cozy, and the kind of place where you could just be yourself. As we sat across from each other, laughing and enjoying our meal, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come from that first awkward encounter when she pulled me over for speeding, to the way she left her number on the back of the ticket. Every moment had led us to this point. It was like everything had aligned perfectly. And now here we were, just two people ready to take on whatever came next. "I'm really glad we did this," I said, looking at her with sincerity. "I'm glad we met." She smiled, her eyes shining with affection. "Me too." From that night on, things only continued to grow. We didn't rush anything, but we also didn't hold back. There was no more uncertainty, no more hesitation. It felt like we had found something real, something worth fighting for. And in the weeks that followed, I realized that sometimes life took you on unexpected journeys. It had led me to Avery, and in return, I had found something I hadn't even known I was looking for: love. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough.